Hey everyone, here for another episode of the Growth Mindset Podcast. This is season 2. I'm your host, David March, owner of Innovative Marketing Solutions, author of the book Vision in Action. And every about week or so, we have a new guest on. And today's guest is Brad. Brad is the CEO of Bullhorn Creative. Brad, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. Glad to be here. Excited to talk about branding, marketing, all of these sorts of topics that we both think about a lot. So, yeah, Brad Flowers. I'm co-founder of Bullhorn, and we started in 2008. We work primarily with professional and financial services companies, and the deliverables we're most often hired to create are things like naming, brand identity, and we also work through brand launch. So that's kind of what we're about.
Oh, yeah. And I like all the greenery. You got a lot of greenery in the back there. You got a lot of plants and stuff. I'm a big fan of plants, so I always like to see some greenery.
Yeah, I think if you have like more plants and more books, it makes you look smarter. That's the
Yeah,
that's
I
the
think that's
trick
what
I'm
it is.
going
I
for.
I gotta get more plants and books. The whole
Yeah,
the whole freaking wall is just gonna be like a climbing vine and
do
then
it.
books like on books.
Yeah, do it.
I love it. Yeah, so when it comes to branding, there's a difference between like branding like a product and branding, services. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Yeah, we think about that an awful lot because a lot of the accepted wisdom about branding is sort of handed down from people working on products, and sometimes that can be misleading for service providers. So, if you're creating and launching and branding a product, there's a bit of distance between the company and the product, and so you want to make sure the product has market fit and consumer testing and all those sorts of things. Where it's a little bit different with the service provider. With the service provider, most often, and I'm talking about things like architecture, real estate development, wealth management, accounting, all of these kinds of things. Even marketing services would really fall within that category too. We actually marketing companies hire us quite often to help them out. Um, so there are a couple of unique things that happen. One is that you're hired for your expertise. And so because it's your expertise, it's something that's really personal. And so often your reputation is on the line with each engagement. So um, uh, that's something we think about a lot. So um, what the observation that we have and the challenge that most companies face is that, and I think you can probably feel this too as someone who runs a professional service company, is that you have these sorts of conversations. You read a book, you listen to a podcast, you watch a movie, and your expertise is kind of constantly compounding and just kind of going. But the problem is, unless addressed, your brand stays static. And so what happens over time is there's this gap between your brand and your expertise. And which is ultimately what we do, is that people hire us to close that expertise brand gap. Because if you don't address it, the issue is that you're saying, oh, we do this and this and that, and then someone goes to your website and they're like, I don't know, these people don't like, it doesn't really line up. He talks a good game, but then when I actually look, it's like it looks like the website was built in 2005. And so if you don't close that gap between who you are and how you're perceived, it can undermine trust, which in all of
Mm.
these professional services, really trust is the main currency, which kind of gets back to that initial point, which is each engagement really is about your reputation. And so if the brand isn't in alignment with your expertise, it can really cause reputational problems.
Yeah, and um, the idea of like a low trust economy society is almost systemic, because
Mm.
there's so many other things that are going on in the world that's creating that whole thing too. Um, in terms of
Yeah.
like low trust, and that can go from a lot of different ways, from governments and news, a lot
Yeah.
of fake news out there, kind of like things like this, and then the ability to spin up AI slop at any time.
Yeah.
um so is that, again, is that real news, is that fake news? It's like all these things are ticking at your trust factor. And so it's definitely a challenge, I think, nowadays, in terms of um building up the trust that you can have as a service provider. um so
For
you mean,
sure.
when you think about all that kind of in the
Yeah. I mean,
larger, the bigger picture.
yeah. I mean, bringing up, but I think you're right. In general, there's sort of a crisis of trust. Who do you trust? Who's authoritative? Um,
Yeah.
in an era where so many of the cultural institutions, whether it's like religious, government, big businesses, all of these things, it's like where's the source of truth? Um, I
Yeah.
think I think that's I think that's an interesting observation. And another point that's like really directly applicable day to day is that your point about AI. And a lot of people, this isn't my observation, but a lot of people talk about it as a force multiplier, or it aids with velocity or speed or whatever. And it's 100% true, which can be good if you're headed in the right direction, and if you're headed in the wrong direction, can be disastrously bad. So it's like, if you're doing the wrong thing faster, is that good?
Yeah.
Probably not, is my guess. I don't know.
No,
I'd probably
I
want to
would
slow
say
down
no.
and slow down on doing the wrong thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, AI is a real challenge, because if your brand foundations aren't in check, and aren't, if your brand strategy isn't solid, really all it does is it helps you realize that faster. And it shows where your knowledge gaps are. It shows where you don't really understand your customers. It shows where you really don't actually even understand what you do. And in some ways, it kind of can highlight that your culture may not be what you say it is. So
Yeah.
um, it's interesting. Like, initially seeing some of these early LLM models, and people were talking about how professional services would go away, and it's certainly going to change everything. But for me, it sort of highlighted the importance of what we do, because
Uh-huh.
it's like the thinking behind it. Like, for example, naming. This is something we do. Um, and an AI can generate lots of names really fast, but having access to a lot of names wasn't really ever the problem, was it? Like, there were always lots of names. The problem
Yeah.
was, how do you know what's a good name? How do you identify it? And then how do you choose it? So, and that's the hard part. So
Yeah.
anyway, it just highlights where like true expertise is, and where the stand-ins are, I guess.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that's a great point too. It's a good observation as well. And another big thing when it comes to this, that you touched on a little bit, is like the consistency from beginning to end in terms of the branding.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of difficult. Um, and you know, of course you can use AI, but I mean, I think there's a bigger thing going on to create the consistency. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, that is true. And for the first time, most of the history, we've been worked mainly on project to project. So if someone hires us, we create the kind of the brand foundations, we do the language, the design that fills out the brand, and then we sort of shake hands and they go about and do their business. But more and more people are hiring us to stay around, really exactly what you're talking about, because consistency is hard, and because with tools to work faster, you can get off track faster. And so, we're working with in-house. For example, we have a new offering that we've just started, that really comes straight from an observation. We work with a lot of in-house marketing teams, and the in-house marketing teams want to stay on brand, but they oftentimes like aren't sure if they're using the right tools, aren't sure if they're using the tools in the right way. And so we're coming along helping them choose the right tools to use. And it could be something like Canva or Figma or something like that is kind of what I'm talking about here. And we help them choose these things, whichever the right thing in their context. And then also we help build in the guardrails so that they can stay on brand for as long as possible. But I kind of think because the world changes and because your culture's changing, it's natural to have, um, you know,
Some
brand
changes within.
entropy. Yeah.
Yeah, some it's like can't be consistent like for from beginning to end for on and on and on
Forever.
because humans
Yeah.
change, yeah, forever, right? Because humans change, people change, and things happen where you make transitions and you make these different changes.
Yeah, and that expertise brand gap that I talked about at the beginning, that doesn't just happen once. That's always happening. So,
Mm.
eventually, that's why kind of a lot of what we're doing now is like we almost never do what I would consider a true like rebrand. We're doing brand maintenance or brand like evolution because we're just like, okay, so we're this and this and this is working great, but these few things don't really make sense anymore. Can you help us kind of bring everything back together? And so it's like brand as like maintenance is sort of an interesting um, new thing
Yeah.
that is partly, again, partly because I'm thinking about I have a friend who has a commercial landscape company, and he's in business because the grass always grows. So it's like,
Cross. Yeah.
we're doing brand maintenance because things are always changing, and and it's and things are changing faster and faster, as you mentioned.
Yeah. So, I'm curious, Brad, because we come at marketing from very different angles.
Yeah.
I'm coming from more of the go-to-market engineering side, um, outbound marketing and, really looking at the story the data is telling us with MarTech and things like that. You know, and this could be, working with a funnel a lot of different ways, right? You have cold traffic coming in, and then it's like, okay, what are they doing next? Are they clicking on the white paper, going to pricing page, going to the blog, like kind of using data to see this story the data is telling us to
Mm.
inform the marketing approach, email, for ads, retargeting ads, you know, these type of things. So I'm coming at it from a really kind of a different perspective in terms of marketing. Um, so I'm curious, like, how do these two things intersect, or you know, is there some kind of connection between the two of those?
Well, I suspect, you just mentioned several things like email marketing, landing pages, consumer behaviors. I assume you see a lot of it, or digital ads. Like those are all
Yeah,
things that are. It's really hard to keep all of those kind of talking from the same perspective.
yeah,
Um, so you probably see where it gets really wild, and it's like, whoa,
yeah,
where did that email come from? That is like doesn't sound right at all. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I think, I mean, um, you see the downstream effects of a company that is either has it together or doesn't, and it's obvious. It's like if all of their brand is in order and they have the all of the brand assets easily accessible, and when they go to wind up a new landing page, all of the styles are there. So it's like the typography is consistent, the colors are consistent, the tone of voice
mhm,
is consistent. You can feel that. And if they don't have that in place, it's like the Wild West. And you can picture like a boom town, and it's like it just looks like this sprawling thing that just keeps getting cobbled and cobbled together. And you're thinking like, yeah, man, one heavy wind and this is all going to fall down.
yeah,
Um, so I think that's kind of where we meet. Like you're kind of trying to figure out what does the data tell us on the back end? And we're on the front end, like, okay, how can we like package this all together in a way that that is like a compelling way to like articulate what's interesting about this company, which from our perspective, a lot of what we're doing is helping show what the culture is like. And in when I say culture, I don't mean like ping pong tables and beer in the fridge. I mean culture as the
Yeah.
combination of their values and their expertise. Because,
Yeah.
it's like if you were looking for a job, you would want to know, what are their values? Are they going to like be good to work with? Are they nice?
Yeah.
Are they respectful? Whatever. Are they like eager to learn? And then you would want to know, like, are they actually experts? Are they going to be around for the long haul? Do they know what they're talking about? So it's like you have to have both. Anyway, so yeah, we're
That's
trying to
interesting.
like package all of that up in a way that's compelling and create the tools to help it scale. And if the tools are a limitation, then it just doesn't happen. And it's like kind of the scenario where it all starts to feel cobbled together.
Yeah, yeah. So what I get from that is, having your brand guidelines set up real strong, and really getting that dialed in, and then from my end, it's almost like the back end is really just like kind of math. It's just like
Right.
adding up, like, well, this guy clicked on the pricing page like 4 times, and I could see he put the add to cart for his service or product, several times. He didn't do anything, but you're just like adding all these things up, and you're trying to do some math to determine what's going on in the back end. But you're more on the front end, more looking at like the brand guidelines and setting all that up. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I think so. Like if you're on the back end, if you're sort of, the analogy is you're more like doing math. On the front end, I would say we're sort of more like an anthropologist. Like if there was this group of like young skateboarders and you were like, as now newly old guys, if you're to go into that group and try to understand them really quickly, like how would you do it? So, you might like do one-on-one interviews. You might do group interviews. You might just stand and observe for a while. You might send surveys, so it's like, and so you're trying to figure out like what language do they use, what design, like what aesthetic do they like, what brands do they affiliate themselves with. So those are the sorts of things we're doing, is trying to use those kind of the ethnology. Anyway, I'm getting my terminology mixed up. All of a sudden I'm blanking on a word I say like 1,000 times a day. But yeah, we're trying to just like kind of create those pictures of these people, of how, who are they and how can we understand them. And anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never heard of it talked about it that way. From a anthropology kind of lens.
Yeah.
When I was in school, I thought the coolest class that I went to was like cultural anthropology. I
Yeah,
was
it's
like,
cool.
wow, these guys know what they're talking about. And it's like such an elaborate kind of study. Um,
Yeah, it's fun because you realize you kind of have to have a respect for how, on some level, there are some like profound similarities between groups of people, but on the
mhm.
other hand, there are some big like nuanced differences. And it's like trying to understand where those are is part of the fun part, I think.
I would agree. I would agree. Yeah, what I typically do on these episodes here, about 20 minutes, not too
Yeah.
long. Um, and as we wind down, I always like to ask, um, was there any books that inspired you to learn or to grow in your studies? Uh, you know, your expertise.
Um, Man, there have been so many. Um, there's a book I recently read. It's called Range
Hmm.
by a guy named David Epstein. tough last name for the current era.
Tough
But
last name.
um, it's really good. If you're a generalist like I am, it sort of makes the case for why generalists are important, because you're as someone who's interested in lots of things. Like when I come to a project, I'm thinking about a novel that I just read, and maybe I'm thinking about some bicycling brand that I'm interested in, and so it's like all of these different things like provide value rather than just someone who's like a hardcore specialist. Makes the case for why generalists matter and why groups of people who have different expertise um, often solve harder problems faster.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, I resonate with that a lot. I also have like varied interests in
Yeah,
general kind of generalist kind of viewpoints and stuff like that. And I also think that that is going to be a big thing in the future, having like um all this multidisciplinary kind of um ideas going on and putting them together and being the one person that kind of has a handle on all of them to make a project move forward or things like
yeah.
that. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, if anyone wants to find you, Brad, to talk more about the different stuff that you got going on, is there a good way to, get in contact with you?
Yeah, we are at Bullhorn Creative pretty much all over the internet, bullhorncreative.com, pretty active on LinkedIn, Instagram. And I also am pretty active, post a couple of times a week on LinkedIn if you're interested in some of the topics I brought up today related to, professionals, the unique kind of challenges of branding professional services firms, especially in contrast with the knowledge we get from products. I write about that quite a bit.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for getting on here, Brad. This is the Growth Mindset Podcast signing off. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.